Good morning. Welcome to the Brew. I'm your host, Lex. And today we have special guests, Daniel and Dave of AlphaVane. So we're going to get into their platform. They're integrated at Tradier. Some great features. I'm going to let them explain it because I can't do it justice. So stay tuned for that opening bell. There's a little elevator music still. Hang in there. Stay with it. Stay with it. What's up, guys? How are you?
Hey man, how you doing?
Good. Dan, you go like Daniel. I keep saying Dan. Sorry, I'm very casual. I apologize.
Either one works. I'm pretty casual too.
All right.
Dan, Daniel, whatever.
Okay, so Dave's on top, Daniel's down below. Is that right?
That's right.
Yep.
All right. Good to see you guys. I don't think we've seen each other in person really. We've talked on the phone and been on Zooms before.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is exciting. So tell us a little bit about yourselves and how'd you get into trading and finance and this whole spiel here. Give us a little background.
You want to go first, Dave, or?
I'll go ahead and talk about me. I'm good at that, but I'll let you talk about the platform. So I mostly got into trading back in about 2017 when Robinhood came out. Everybody had it on their phone and they were trading it around. And some of the guys I worked with were like, "Hey, check this thing out. You can actually trade on your phone now. You don't have to, don't have to get on a whole computer and call into the brokers and all kinds of stuff." So I was like, "Oh, this is exciting." And of course, once you start playing with that, then you got to eventually graduate to something that lets you do a lot more strategies. So moved up to doing a more robust broker, you could say. Moved off the phone and onto the computer, and I was still using it on the phone, but started getting into all these option strategies and really digging into and learning how to do all these things besides just investing in a stock. Prior to that, it was all fundamental analysis and boglehead kind of stuff. But I really got excited by the stocks. Really loved the kind of mechanical aspects of figuring out how to beat the game. Figuring out the math. So from there, that was where my journey started. Started studying everything I could about options and how the probabilities work and all that good stuff. So
Great. Okay, good. Dan, go ahead.
I just buy dog coins. Memes to the moon. No. I mean, I have a similar story. Like, I was a little bit later to the game, but really, I wasn't even paying attention to markets or anything until about COVID. And, when right before COVID, I was actually booking a tour for my band. We were about to start playing all over, and then that just got canceled. And I was like, well, what do I do now? I have all this free time. And a similar story, a friend was like, hey, there's this thing called Robinhood. You can, like, buy and trade stocks, and the classic story, you get on there, you start messing around, everybody buys the 3x leverage ETF, Who needs to know about, like, contango and forwardization, that's not necessary, whatever. But, yeah, I mean, start playing, bought some options, sold some options, ended up burning money like most people do when they first start out, and then similar story, you start getting into the probabilities, you start learning all these different kind of strategies, everything you can do. And then I learned about this guy named Jim Simons, and I was like, whoa, what is this? And that really inspired me to think about it as like, oh, I get it now. This is not just, these candle patterns or whatever. There's like math and there's statistics and probability behind it, and what this game actually is data analysis. Like, what you're doing is, this is a massive data, and you're basically seeing how well can you synchronize it. And then before too long, I mean, me and Dave actually met in a trading group, and he kind of introduced me to some new stuff. I never even thought about fundamental analysis or any of that stuff before that. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a journey from there.
And that's awesome. And then AlphaVane. So how'd you come up with the name AlphaVane? What's it mean? Does it have any special meaning?
So it's funny you ask. We were thinking about names for a long time. We were trying to come up with something. You want it to be catchy. You
Right.
want it to really roll off the tongue, but also wanted it to have a meaning. And, we just kept trying. Probably, what would you say? We spitballing names for at least a month or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I think you made some offhand comment about the wind or something, and it made me think of weathervane. And I was like, well, weathervane tells you where the wind is blowing. It points to it. So I was like, well, an AlphaVane points to the alpha.
Okay.
There
And
you
then
go.
the nice part was it worked out to have kind of a double entendre because there's a piece on an airplane that's called the AlphaVane, and it helps you determine kind of the pitch of the airplane, like where you're going up and down, and kind
Yep.
of tells you where you're at in space. So it's got that double meaning of
Okay.
helping you to pilot your portfolio to a safe landing or to take off.
Are you a pilot by chance, Dave, or no?
No, I'm not.
Not yet. That's
Not
his
yet,
next
right?
set.
That's the
Not
next.
yet. Not yet.
Awesome. Good. So, all right, good. This sounds great. Well, now tell us about AlphaVane specifically. What does it do? Is it automated? Give us the whole elevator pitch here on the product.
So, the overarching view is that we're trying to break down quantitative views into very accessible things where this is easy to just look at real quick. There's not like a whole process behind it. So, the first thing it does right now, and this is, well, it really does three things. It's a trading platform. You can go on there, make trades, execute them on Tradier. The other thing it does is it has an integrated trading journal. That's just a good habit
Yep.
to have. Anybody that's trading, we would both recommend keeping notes on your trade, pay attention to why you're doing things, how are you thinking about it when you're doing it. You're probably going to notice that if you do things impulsively, it doesn't work out very well. So
Right.
there's that. We tried to make that as easy as possible. And then it has an expected value calculator. And we did this a couple ways very intentionally. So, there's many ways you can solve for EV, but we chose to do it with a Monte Carlo methodology. Monte Carlo simulations, I think most people know what those are now. But, the cool thing about that is that if you do it with a Monte Carlo simulation, you can plug in more than just parameters at expiration. Most people, when they're calculating expected value, what they're telling you is, at expiration, what is this relative to now? But there's no dimension of like what does this look like through time if you were to do different things. And so ours, when you go on there, you can actually put in like, well, what happens if I take profit at 50%? How does that move my expected value? What if I take the trade off at 5 days to expiration? What if I put in a stop loss? Different things like that. And we thought that was really useful for multiple reasons. One, it's just cool to add the extra dimension of through time. How does this move around? But also, people seem to really struggle with figuring out, like, when should you take profits? If you put on a trade, when do you do it? When should you cut losses? It seems like most people that I see that are trying to trade and stuff, they remind me of, like, somebody who's trying to swim in the middle of the ocean. Like, they're just trying to find some piece of land or a raft or something, figure out what's going on, and they really have trouble deciding like where would be a good point. And this at least gives you a quantitative basis. Like, it's not saying that this is the best management parameters you could do, but at least now you're not just shooting in the dark, just guessing. You have some real math behind, well, this would be a better idea than this.
Right. Okay. So what have you found? Have you found any sort of pattern relative to the EV or Monte Carlo simulation? And I agree with you 100%. Most people look at that and say, oh, I've got to hold this to expiry, which isn't, as you said, isn't always the case. So is there a honey zone, I guess I'm asking, of the expected value calculation where it just kind of makes sense to get out at X percent? Have you found anything like that yet?
I think it really shifts around based on where you are. The volatility surface plays a lot into this, and it also plays into like, how does your trade shift in expected value based on what's happening? A lot of times people think of trades and they just think, I'm going to do your standard 30 delta, put credit spread. And they think that's a good one. SPY always goes up or whatever, but it's not necessarily. If you have a really contracted volatility, or even if you have expanded volatility, but the skew is really, really high, like that's probably actually not a positive expected value trade. There's a ratio there. And what you really want to do is find like relative to what the volatility is pricing in now to what these things have been known to move, the distributions that they create, what would be an ideal thing to create. So oftentimes, like VIX has been pretty low the last, I don't know, month or two, would you say?
Yep.
So, generally when that happens, what you're really looking to do is up your delta exposure and lower some of the other Greeks because you want to have that lower probability trade that has the bigger payouts because the extra probability isn't actually worthwhile relative to like the distributions that the stocks are forming. Like generally those are going to be negative EV. And this really, I think that's a huge thing of like where this helps out is like how should you be shifting your risk reward ratios?
Sure. So when one of your users sets this up, walk me through that. So where do they come up with the strategy in the first place? Is there help in the product to say, hey, you might take a look at a put credit spread? Again, I'm making that up. And then you hit a button and it spits out EV and all the simulations. How does it play out in reality?
So you have to have an idea beforehand.
Okay.
One thing we probably will do in the future is doing some kind of trade idea generation. But right now, it's kind of, there's a lot of surfaces and not surfaces, but there's a lot of different places we can go and find trade ideas now. I think almost every broker has watch lists that come pre-installed with the broker. Most people have different scanners and stuff. So we don't really provide ideas, but you come in with an idea. Say you want to trade, put credit spread on SPY. You know what strikes, what expiration you're looking at. You can go into the platform, hit SPY, or pull up the option chain and select your options. And then it brings up a screen that says, all right, what parameters would you like to calculate this with? You can enter profit target, you can enter a stop loss cutoff point, or days to expiration. And then you just hit a button and it calculates it for you. And then if you don't like that one, then you can change the numbers and calculate it again and see how it changed.
Okay. So, and then do you find that most folks, keep hitting that button and find the optimum number ultimately and say, there it is right there? They kind of work backwards a little bit.
It seems like most people like to move it around some. They like to play with it. We're still pretty new, so we haven't had as much user database and user data and feedback as we could have at this point. But from what we've seen, it seems like people like to check a few things, move it around, see how it moves.
Right.
Yeah, they like to get an idea for kind of how it moves as they move different things, and then to try to find a good number that they like. They're not necessarily going to find the most optimal one, but they are going to find one that's positive that looks good for their risk. So.
Okay, so there's a lot of things that do probability of profit and probability of loss, right? And you can see that, but a lot of those systems do it to the end of the term, right? And you said it a little bit, but I want to emphasize it. That's not the end of the story, right? So when you see those numbers, you don't simply multiply probability of profit times the profit you get, divide it by the probability of loss times the max loss, and come up with a ratio. And you're trying to always look for a ratio number that's really positive for you. It's not that simple. There's all this EV thrown in there that because people don't hold till expiry. So they really should use that EV number, I think, at least that's my opinion, to come up with a good, maybe even a good ratio for themselves. Because I talk a lot about this too. Make sure you have edge in your favor. You don't want negative edge, right? So make sure you have edge in your favor. But, you guys, I think, have modernized how we look at it, it sounds like.
Yeah, that was the goal when we set out to do this, because all the tools that we had run into up to this point for calculating EV and all the methods that we'd seen for calculating EV that are typically used are to that expiration, and they use the delta models and all of that. And you don't really have a way to see how it's affected when you use like what are considered almost like best practice by a lot of people to do the, take profit at 50% on your strangle, or take, profit at 25% on your straddle, or whatever. Not being able to see those numbers doesn't give you the ability to have that intuitive feel of when you break those rules.
Right.
because rules are great, but occasionally you're going to want to bend, break, change the things depending on how the environment is actually changing around you.
Mm-hmm.
Because tail risk is something that exists, and if you don't account for it, you can actually wind up with what would otherwise be positive trades breaking to a negative side for you because the tail risk was so big.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um,
Yeah. I think it's important. I love the way you guys are doing this. Now, did you guys do all the mathematics, or is it is it something that you did a little research on and kind of
No, I
tailored?
mean, we calculated from the beginning. I mean, all the code was written in house. We did everything from scratch, and we're actually pulling most of the data from Tradier. When people
Mm-hmm.
connect their accounts, we're using that API access to pull
Sure.
most of the data.
Okay. Okay. How did you guys stumble upon Tradier? Because you guys are integrated with us. Everyone knows I'm with Tradier, so that's no secret. So how did you stumble upon us?
I think you guys showed up in my YouTube feed. There was a time when people were looking for like every single broker. Like I'm pretty sure in a group that me and Dave were both in, people were just trying to map out every single broker, and you guys came up on the list. And I didn't really do much at first, but when we started looking around to build this, we were trying to figure out who would be the best partner to start with, who's the most set up for what we're trying to do. And you guys did a really good job on the API. I mean, it's a solid API. You have a good setup for making data accessible to people.
No, that's that. We do get that a lot on the API stuff. So I'm glad to hear that. And I'm kind of one of the stories too. I wasn't always a Tradier. We had a product that we built that they ultimately bought from us. Same reasons, right? Very easy to access and good output, what have you. You mentioned trading journals, right, earlier. Tell me a little bit more about that because I also think that's important. You guys kind of think like I do a good bit on the trading front. So what's special about the trading journals? Give me a little background there.
Special about the trading journals we have, or
Yeah,
just
no, yeah, about what you have and about generally. You obviously decided to add it, so it must mean something to you guys, right?
yeah, well, trading journal is something that I've always kind of preached, and I think I was the one who drilled it into Daniel's head when we first started. And the usefulness of being able to go back and look at your your trades, why you took them, what your plan was, whether that plan worked out, and even more important to me is state of mind
Mm-hmm.
when you took the trade and kind of the emotional responses you had to it, because that's where I feel the most problems spring up for traders
Yeah.
is that you get into your feelings about the trade and you start straying from your mechanics and your plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to go back and look at that journal that you put in there where it starts out, it says, why did you take this trade? And you put that in there in your own words. It asks you, what's your state of mind?
Yep.
What's your management plan for this trade? So you can go back and look at whether you stuck to your management plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a notes section where you can put anything else that we didn't think of to ask.
Sure.
So people can really kind of customize it to however they want to be able to look back and understand
Mm-hmm.
what was going through their head and
Right.
what happened.
Powerful. I love it. I like the fact that you guys gave questions that have to be answered. I like that part. Especially the state of mind. I can tell you I come from the floor world, the trading floor world on the pro side, and we don't think like that. We just respond. We're very reactive. We buy bids, we sell offers. So our edge is built into that bid ask. Coming off floor, different game, right? As you guys know, and having that whole gamut of being able to define all that stuff you just went through, I think it's vital because I see so many retail folks make critical emotion based mistakes, and any way you can eliminate the emotion from something is great in my opinion, so it sounds like you guys are heading down that path, which is awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I will say it's not enforced per se. You can trade without filling it out. We're not going to force you
Sure.
to.
Right.
But it is, we tried to make it as convenient as possible where it comes up when you trade right away.
Mm-hmm.
And, The other thing is that we also have plans for adding more to this in the future. Right now it does those things that Dave described, but
Right.
I think it could also be useful if it automatically tracks some things like what was your deltas when you opened this? What did the skew of the legs you were looking at have? You can record some quantitative metrics about your trade and just build that in. But for right now, we focused on the most important aspects, or at least what we thought were most important, were those define your management parameters and really get the objective static reference for your mindset around this. Are you approaching this in a good way? And if not, recognize that you're not, so you can start improving it.
Sure. That's great. What other kind of things are you guys thinking about? What give us some coming soon to AlphaVane? Yeah, besides, that sort of template. What else? What other things are popping up? Do you think?
Well, one thing we're considering adding very soon is potentially fundamental analysis templates.
Okay.
And let Dave talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, the fundamental analysis stuff that we're kind of thinking about adding would be to be able to map on a lot of the fundamentals of the company on with your stock charts and your technicals and stuff, so that people can see correlations between how the fundamentals are actually affecting the stocks and how they're interacting with things like their options trades and their actual investments. So because a lot of people have a hard time with actually kind of internalizing the fundamentals and how it actually interacts with them as a trader versus being as an investor. And we want this also to be something that's useful to investors and traders alike, ultimately down the line. And one of the other things we were talking about possibly integrating with the fundamentals module would be doing something like having like a super investors template where you could say, hey, I want to look at the same stuff that Buffett looks at, or I want to look at the same stuff that Terry Smith looks at, or whichever investor you find is like your idol or the person that you like to follow.
Sure.
To have a template that pulls up the same kind of general fundamental things that they focus on as the primary focus, and then everything else kind of off to the side that you can still find on your own. But that allows people to kind of customize how they want to look at companies.
Sure. Okay. And we talked a little bit about automation, so that's on the back burner a little bit. You're thinking about something there. Any kind of sneak peeks at automation from your minds?
So the first part is probably just going to be automated trade management, where you'll still be opening whatever trade ideas you're looking at and analyzing, but instead of having to sit there and watch it and go close it, we'll do something where it's checking it and it will close it based on the parameters you look at. And the thing we're planning on implementing too is there's going to be an option where as you're calculating your EV, we're asking you for a profit target, a stop loss, and a DTE, and we're going to just auto-populate that as an option. So the EV you calculate is automatically going to be populated to the management, and it will close the trades based on what you looked at.
I like that. That's good. I pound the drum of automation a lot too. Again, back to the reason that most retailers tend to let their emotions get in their way. And if we can define an entry strategy and define an exit strategy, still might not be wonderful, but at least you're taking one massive bad component out of the equation, right? And that's you. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I still make dumb mistakes because I get emotional about it. And I would love to have that ability. And the other thing too, what I find about the retail world, there's a lot of folks who do this not for a living. They do it extra. They're still doctors and lawyers and accountants, and they've got meetings to go to. And you know what? What happens if a meeting runs past the close and you said, oh no, I forgot to close this, right? Kind of thing, or whatever the time frame is.
No, exactly.
That automation's a big help. I think so. I think that's great. You guys are looking at that.
No, exactly. I mean, that's we both have worked regular jobs. We both have done the day hours and been in that exact situation where it's you're at work, but something's happening and you weren't able to close this trade when you were trying to,
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, good. So let's wrap it up, but let's tell us a little bit. We go to alphavane.com.io. Where do we go?
Yeah, we're available at alphavane.com.
Okay.
if we can, we'll probably link this in the show notes. I assume that's an
we'll do all that. Yep, no problem. Ballpark idea. What's your pricing model for AlphaVane for someone to use this on a regular basis? You charge monthly? Do you have an annual fee? Tell us a little bit about that as well.
Currently, it's monthly. It's $35 a month for the level 1 plan, which is the existing plan.
Okay.
There will be other levels later as we add more modules, and we are working on doing a annual subscription model, which will give a discount.
Okay.
But it's not currently implemented.
Okay, and you said 35, Dave, is that right?
35, yes, sir.
Okay, 35 per month. Got it. And that gets you to essentially unlimited trading on the platform. Is that accurate at this point?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. AlphaVane.com. We will flow that through here. Don't worry about it. Anything else the viewers should know? What else do we need to know about this? Besides, you guys are really cool, and I love it. So what else?
I'll just pitch one more thing that's coming to the platform because we think this is going to be pretty cool. So we talked about how a lot of people calculate their EV with the delta distributions. This is one thing we want to do too is we're going to add that as well, but then we're going to back solve for what the distribution would be for a random number generator for a Monte Carlo simulation, and then we're going to let you calculate it both ways and compare them. So we're going to do the delta EV and the
Monte Carlo.
Yeah, well, they're both Monte Carlo, but it'd be the motion. You build the distribution based on stock's movement, and this would be also backwards engineer the distribution based on the volatility surface delta distribution, and then calculate it with both, so you can see how are these numbers shifting and what is this telling you. And we're gonna work on really developing some data and references for how to use this and how to synchronize these data points.
Love it. That's awesome. That's really cool. Has the zero DTE crowd, can they enjoy this too? I mean, we've got literally 6 hours of time left in particular trades, right? Had you gotten that granular yet?
It can work with the zero DTE stuff, but they're so wild. You're running it. Everything's like amped up to the max on those with your Greeks, and we don't recommend it for zero DTE yet. It works really better right now in the typical kind of few days all the way out to like maybe 90 days to expiration is your like ideal kind of sweet spot.
Yep.
But you can use it at zero DTE. It's just going to be wild as far as your variance in between EV and actual execution.
Right.
And I would say like it's not on our immediate next things to come but some ideas we are throwing around is adding other dimensions. When you really start thinking about zero DTE, what you're really starting to be concerned with is the kurtosis of the tails of your distribution and how that's going to correlate with your gamma. And I don't know of anybody that actually provides really good references on that, but that is something we're thinking about and probably will be coming, but that's not on our immediate next things to do.
Gotcha.
Maybe we check back in 6 months, 8 months, and maybe that'll be more frontward, but not yet.
Awesome. I love it. All right, good. Well, it's great talking to you guys. I'm so happy you guys are happy with the Tradier offering. That's a great price, $35. How can you beat that, right? And built in with all of our commission schedules, which is basically nothing. It's a great offering. So AlphaVane.com. Dave and Daniel, thanks for coming on. We will have this processed, and probably in a week or so we'll send it to you, and you'll get a copy of this, and it'll be on our YouTube and on our hub. Sound good?
Great.
Sounds
great.
good.
Awesome. And we'll do this again for sure. Anytime you want to do it again, when you have new offerings, it's awesome. We'd love to have you. Thanks for coming on. All right. We'll talk afterwards. Stick around afterwards. All right.
All right.
All right, guys.
You know how the financial world goes. Here comes the buzzkill. Please make sure to take some time to read this boring disclaimer. We will owe you one.